Welcome in, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're looking at something kind of special.
Yeah?
It's excerpts from the Dalai Lama's talks during his first U.S. tour back in 1979
Yeah, a really fascinating time.
from the book Kindness, Clarity, and Insight. And it's amazing to kind of see how he was presenting himself and his teachings in those early days.
Yeah, and how Buddhism was first being introduced to the West. I mean, he wasn't the global icon that he is today. This was a very pivotal moment.
Yeah, it was kind of a carefully orchestrated introduction.
Really
And
was.
speaking of orchestrated, the book delves into all the behind-the-scenes work that went into this tour.
Oh, yeah.
You had people like Joel McCleary working with President Carter's administration.
Yeah. And Tenzin Tethong, who later became the, prime minister of the Tibetan government in exile.
Like a political thriller.
Really?
They were really pulling strings to make this happen.
And what's really interesting is they made a conscious decision to avoid all the media hype. So no big press conferences or anything like that. Just smaller gatherings, university lectures, direct engagement.
So it's really about getting the message out there.
Exactly the power of his message, not the spectacle.
And can you imagine 49 days, 24 cities, 67 talks?
It's grueling.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
I know.
And he covered everything: compassion, meditation.
Emptiness, the nature of reality. I mean, the sheer volume of information is incredible.
Yeah, and one thing that really struck me was this passage where someone asks him about all the different religions and the conflict that seems to come with them. And he says, if I look at you superficially, we are different. If I look on you as my own kind, as human beings,
Yes.
then automatically that distance is gone. We are the same human flesh. I want happiness. You also want happiness.
Such a powerful statement.
It's so simple, but it's so true.
It cuts through all the dogma and reminds us that we're all human.
Yeah, we all want the same basic things.
That's it, happiness and to avoid suffering.
And recognizing that shared ground,
Yeah.
that's the first step towards understanding each other.
Absolutely. And it's so important, especially in today's world, with all the division and polarization going on.
It's almost radical to suggest that we focus on what unites us.
It is, but it's something that the Dalai Lama emphasizes consistently throughout his teachings.
And this ties into that idea of cultivating a warm heart.
Right, which is more than just being nice. It's about
Right.
actively developing compassion, kindness, genuine concern for the well-being of others.
So how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate this warm heart?
Well, he brings up meditation a lot,
Okay.
which sometimes seems esoteric, but the way he presents it is very practical.
Okay.
Like focusing on a simple object, a flower, a candle flame.
Yeah.
Anything to train the mind for calmness and clarity.
It's so simple. I love that.
It is, and it can be so powerful, especially in our world of constant distractions.
Absolutely.
It's like hitting the reset button on your mind.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting is how he describes the mind
Oh, yeah.
as mere luminosity and knowing.
With limitless potential.
Limitless
Wow.
potential. It's like you can constantly grow and develop.
Exactly. It's not like our physical abilities, which have limits.
Right.
The mind can keep expanding and evolving.
I find that empowering and a little intimidating at the same time.
It is. It really makes you wonder what we're all capable of.
And, speaking of potential, that's where he introduces the Four Noble Truths.
Ah, yes, a central concept in Buddhist thought.
So how do these truths apply to our modern lives,
Yeah.
with all the stress and busyness?
Well, the first truth is simply acknowledging that suffering exists.
Oh, okay.
And he points out that there are actually 3 types of suffering.
3 types. Okay, I'm listening.
The first is the obvious suffering of pain, like a toothache or, anything like that.
Makes sense.
Then there's the suffering of change, which is more subtle.
Okay, how so?
Well, it's that realization that even pleasurable things eventually change or disappear, leading to disappointment or sadness. Like think about, buying a new car. You're excited at first, but then that fades and you see someone with a newer model and suddenly...
Suffering.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so true. I never thought of it that way.
And then there's the third type,
Okay.
which is more like a pervasive existential suffering.
Wow, so that's getting a little more philosophical.
It's inherent to the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
It's like a fundamental part of the human condition.
Exactly.
I've never thought of it like that.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is. I think we need a moment to process all this.
I agree.
We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the Dalai Lama's teachings.
So, digging into these 4 noble truths.
Yeah.
That second one about clinging being the root of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
it's really relevant to what so many people are going through these days.
Yeah, I mean, like burnout, for example, is everywhere.
Exactly. We're always striving for more productivity,
More achievement.
more validation.
But are we actually happier?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Dalai Lama seems to be saying that true happiness comes from letting go,
Right, letting go of those attachments.
not clinging to things.
Exactly, because everything is impermanent.
But that's a tough one to swallow.
It is, especially in our culture.
We're so programmed to achieve, to strive.
It's almost counterintuitive to say, just let go, be content.
So what's the alternative?
Well, he talks about cultivating qualities like compassion,
Okay,
generosity, wisdom. These are the 6 perfections.
6 perfections. Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So first you have generosity.
Okay.
And that's not just about money.
Right.
It's about giving your time, your attention, even forgiveness.
It's like an abundance mindset.
Yes, exactly. There's enough to go around.
And giving actually makes you feel better.
It does. And then there's ethics,
Okay.
which is about more than just following rules.
Right.
It's about inner peace and integrity.
So doing what's right, even when no one's watching.
Exactly. Having that inner compass.
I like that.
And then, of course, there's patience.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is, but it's essential.
Especially these days.
Right. We want everything now.
Instant gratification.
But patience is about accepting that things unfold in their own time.
Yeah. Learning to go with the flow.
Exactly. And then there's effort.
Okay, so this is where we actually have to do something.
Well, it's not about brute force.
Okay.
It's about consistent and dedicated practice.
Showing up every day.
Exactly. And not trying to do too much too soon.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that.
I think we all are.
New Year's resolutions, anyone?
Uh-huh. Exactly. So pacing yourself is key.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then we have concentration.
Okay, back to meditation.
Well, it's not just about sitting on a cushion.
Right.
It's about training your mind to be more focused.
So being present in everyday life.
Exactly. Being aware of your thoughts, your emotions.
It's like upgrading your mental software.
I like that analogy. And finally, there's wisdom.
Okay, so this is like the big picture stuff.
It is. It's about seeing the world clearly.
Understanding how everything's connected.
Right. And recognizing the impermanent nature of reality.
So it sounds like wisdom is the result of all the other perfections.
Exactly. It's like the fruit of your efforts.
I like that. It's a process.
It is. It's a journey.
And this brings us back to the Dalai Lama's observations about the West.
Yeah, he talks about this contrast between material progress and inner peace.
Like we have all this stuff.
But we're not necessarily happier.
He uses that analogy of food for the body and food for the mind.
Right. We've been feasting on material things.
But neglecting our mental and spiritual well-being.
And we're seeing the consequences.
Yeah, anxiety, depression, all that stuff.
Exactly. So the Dalai Lama is offering a different kind of nourishment.
Cultivating a warm heart.
Training the mind.
Seeking wisdom.
Acting with compassion.
Powerful stuff.
It is, and it's really timely.
So how does Buddhism fit into all of this?
Well, that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The Dalai Lama is very open to integrating Buddhism with Western culture. Yeah, he emphasizes that the core principles are universal.
So it's not about converting people.
No, it's about offering tools for a better life.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
He even suggests that some aspects of Tibetan Buddhism might not be relevant in the future.
Even for Tibetans.
Even for Tibetans.
Wow, that's pretty radical.
It is. He's not afraid to challenge traditions.
It's all about evolution, isn't it?
It is. Nothing is fixed.
And that brings us back to impermanence.
Full circle.
I love it. So how do we integrate these teachings in a way that makes sense for us?
That's the big question, and one we'll explore further when we come back.
All right, sounds good. Let's take another break and we'll wrap things up after that. Okay, so we're talking about integrating Buddhism into Western culture, but are there any aspects that the Dalai Lama feels are essential, like non-negotiable?
You know, it's funny you should ask that because in the book, he talks about this question of whether Westerners can truly practice Tibetan Buddhism. And he says, for academics studying it, it's different. But for those who want to practice, it's about really embodying the teachings, not just the intellectual understanding.
So not just like a cultural tourist, collecting practices.
Exactly. He even tells this story about meeting a Theravada monk from Burma who made a clear distinction between cultural trappings and the essence of the teachings.
I see. So like the core principles are universal, but the outer forms can adapt.
Exactly. He's all about using your intelligence to figure out what resonates and what might need to be adjusted.
So like finding that middle way.
Exactly. It's not about clinging to rigid forms or just discarding everything from your own background.
He even says that some Tibetan customs might become irrelevant in the future.
I know, it's pretty radical.
Even for Tibetans.
Even for Tibetans.
Wow, this is all about evolution.
It is, embracing change.
Which brings us back to impermanence.
Right. Nothing is fixed.
So even within a spiritual tradition, there needs to be that openness to adapt.
Absolutely. It's about keeping the essence, but allowing it to express itself in new ways.
It makes me think about all the mindfulness apps and meditation studios popping up everywhere.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's definitely resonating with people, but in a very different form.
Right. It's Buddhism, but with a Western twist.
And who knows what it will look like in the future.
Exactly. But as long as it's rooted in compassion, wisdom, and ethical conduct, the Dalai Lama seems to be okay with it.
And that reminds me of something else he said about inner development not being like technology. You can't just pass it down from one generation to the next.
Right. It's a personal journey.
It takes time and effort.
No shortcuts.
He's not sugarcoating it.
Nope. He's saying you got to put in the work.
Face your own shadows.
And be patient with yourself.
Which is a good reminder for all of us.
Especially these days.
Yeah, we want everything now.
But real transformation takes time.
And you know what's really inspiring is that he's speaking from experience.
He's walked the walk.
He's faced incredible challenges, exiled the loss of his homeland.
Yet he still radiates this sense of peace and compassion.
It's amazing.
It is, and it shows us that even in the midst of suffering,
there's still hope.
There's a way forward.
And it's not about becoming some perfect spiritual being.
No, it's about those small, everyday actions.
Like he says, if others tell you you've changed for the better, that's a good sign.
It means your inner transformation is having a ripple effect.
I love that.
It's about making a positive impact on the world around you.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've learned so much.
From history to philosophy to practical advice.
The Dalai Lama's message is so timeless.
And so relevant to our lives today.
So what's the takeaway?
Cultivate a warm heart, train your mind, seek wisdom, and act with compassion.
That's how we build a better world.
One step at a time.
Beautifully said. Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Dalai Lama's teachings. And as you go about your day, remember those words. Cultivate a warm heart, seek wisdom, and act with compassion. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.